All right, come closer for this one. Shadows don't like to be overheard. The girl woke with the distinct feeling that something had shifted overnight. Not the room. Her bedroom was the same small square of walls, pale morning light crawling across the ceiling, the same plant drooping in its pot, the same notebook on the floor beside the bed. Nothing in the physical world had changed. It was inside her the difference hummed, quiet but undeniable. She sat up and tried to say her own name. Her lips shaped the word. Her throat moved with the effort. Her breath carried it outward. But no sound came. Instead, the wall opposite her rippled. Shadows, thin, trembling, liquid dark, rose up like ink reacting to a sudden cold. They stretched into letters that weren't letters. Something halfway between a shape and a memory. A silhouette of a girl standing exactly where she sat, mouth forming the name she had tried to speak. The shadow version of her opened its mouth wider, and then it dissolved. The girl froze. Her voice was gone. Her shadow had spoken for her. She tried again. "Hello," she whispered, or tried to. No sound. Instead, the shadow on the floor unfurled like spilled oil, rising up in thin wisps that formed a wavering hand, lifted in greeting. The fingers flickered at the edges. The gesture held for a breath, then crumbled back into the floorboards. Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears. She pressed a hand to her throat. It wasn't pain. It wasn't numbness. She could feel her voice moving. It just wouldn't exit as sound, as if her body had rerouted the signal somewhere else. "Mom?" she tried. On the far wall, a soft outline of a door appeared in shadow, a door that wasn't really there. Its shadow hinge opened half an inch. A rectangular shape stepped into view, a parent-like silhouette, faceless but familiar. The shadow reached toward her. She recoiled instinctively, heart hammering. The shadow parent blurred, dissolving into static darkness. Her breath caught in her chest. Had that come from memory? Or from fear? Or from something else entirely? The girl crossed the mirror, barefoot and shaky. "Stop," she said into her reflection. The mirror fogged at its edges, not with moisture, but with darkness. A long shadow streaked across the glass, forming a barrier line as crisp as drawn ink. A boundary. Her boundary. She touched the glass. The line vibrated. So the shadows weren't random. They weren't illusions. They responded to intent. Every attempt at speech produced a shape. Every phrase became an image. It wasn't useless. It was different. But different in a way that felt like a secret she wasn't supposed to know yet. She went downstairs, holding her notebook like a shield. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming out of habit, stirring something on the stove. When she saw the girl enter, she smiled, until she noticed the frozen, frightened look on her daughter's face. "What's wrong?" The girl opened her mouth. The wall beside them shifted. Shadows rose, forming a trembling outline of a girl with both hands lifted in a helpless gesture, shape mouth opening and closing silently. Behind her, another shadow figure, taller, older, leaned forward in confusion. Her mother gasped, stepping back hard enough that her spoon clattered into the sink. What was that?" The girl shook her head. She didn't know how to say, "I can't speak." Her body knew the words, but sound wouldn't carry them. She lifted her notebook and wrote, "I can't talk. My voice is coming out as shadows." Her mother blinked at the words. Not disbelief, just stunned reality arranging. Shadows? She whispered. What do you mean, shadows? The girl exhaled shakily and tried to say. See, a single dark shape crawled up the refrigerator door, a brief flicker of a hand pointing downward. Her mother screamed softly into her palm. The girl's notebook shook in her grip. This wasn't an explanation. This was a complication. Her mother eventually calmed enough to say, We're going to a doctor. Now. The girl nodded. She didn't want doctors. She didn't want strangers. She wanted her voice back. But nodding was easier than forming another image that might betray too much. Because the shadows didn't just say what she meant. They said exactly what she meant. When she thought of fear, the shadows showed a trembling child in a corner. When she thought of loneliness, the shadows shaped the cracked outline of a small empty bed. When she thought of the thing she tried never to think of, the thing in the dark hallway she remembered from when she was 6, a shape appeared beside her mother. Thin, tall, leaning in the wrong direction, arms too long, watching the girl with a tilt of its head. The girl jerked back. Her mother didn't see it, only the girl's panic. What now? She asked breathlessly. The girl shook her head rapidly, but the shadow lingered, stretching across the tiles, fingers tapping in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Not a memory, not a metaphor, a listener. Something in the dark corners had heard her shadow speech, and now it was answering. By late morning, she was sitting under the fluorescent hum of a small-town clinic exam room. The doctor spoke gently, asked questions with careful pacing, tapped lightly along her throat, checked her breath, examined her vocal cords. You're not injured, he said eventually. Your throat looks perfectly normal. The girl wrote in her notebook. But I can't talk. I know, he said softly, but medically, there's nothing wrong. She stared at him, trying to form. Please believe me. The corner of the room darkened. A shadow rose behind the doctor, a misshapen outline of him, with hands lifted in helpless confusion. Another shadow figure behind that one hunched over, scribbling on a clipboard, labeled, No Answers. Her mother saw nothing. The doctor blinked, like he felt a draft. The girl closed her notebook before more truth spilled out through the walls. Because the shadows never lied. They said exactly what she thought, not what she wished she'd thought. And they were fast becoming her only language. Back home, her mother tried to act normal. She made tea. She brought blankets. She texted relatives vague updates. But fear lived in her shoulders now, tightening them each time her daughter's face went pale or distant. The girl turned off the lights in her bedroom and sat in the dim glow of afternoon shadows. Why? She whispered to the empty air. Shadows flowed across the walls. Her voice translated without permission, forming the shape of her sitting alone on the floor, head in hands, surrounded by wavering silhouettes whispering back. She swallowed hard. She tried a different word. What? The shadows stretched upward, forming a vertical column of shapes, layers of memories she didn't remember, choosing. A childhood hallway, a locked closet, a black gap under her bed, a hand she once reached for but left empty. She reached out to touch the shadows, fingertips grazing the surface. They moved away, politely, like they were waiting for the right question. That night, she experimented. She closed the curtains, dimmed the lights, and faced a blank white wall. She whispered, "Help." The wall showed a small figure reaching upward toward a larger silhouette. Her mother's shape, maybe, but the taller one dissolved too quickly to catch. She whispered, "Why?" A circle of shadows rotated, each flickering image showing versions of her younger self standing in different dark spaces. Closets, hallways, stairwells, as if her childhood had been stitched together from pockets of shadow. Then she tried something new. She took a deep breath and thought her meaning before speaking it. "I want to understand." This time, the shadows changed. Not memories, not guesses. A diagram formed, an abstract set of branching lines like a map of meaning, rather than literal representation. The lines bent inward, pointing toward a single dark shape in the corner of the room. The girl frowned. She hadn't meant that, but the shadows had. Something in the corner pulsed once, a slow, listening acknowledgement. Her skin prickled. The shadows weren't only translating, they were teaching. She sat very still, watching the corner. "Who?" she whispered. The ceiling flickered. All four walls rippled. Her own shadow peeled off the floor and stood beside her, facing the same corner. Then it pointed. Not at a memory, not at herself, at something real. The corner darkened beyond natural shadow. Something long and thin reached upward, barely visible, like a silhouette, stretching itself awake. It didn't move toward her. It only reacted, as if her question had been a greeting. The girl froze in place. Her shadow pointed again. Slowly, the thing in the corner tilted its head. An impossible gesture, too fluid, too curious. Her heart pounded so loudly she could feel it in her palms. She remembered the shape from that morning. She had thought it was a fear-made hallucination. But hallucinations didn't answer questions. She stayed sitting on the edge of her bed, breathing shallowly. "Don't," she whispered, or tried to. The wall behind her flickered. A shadow version of herself held up both hands, palms outward in a clear stop gesture. The figure in the corner shrank back slightly. Not afraid, not offended, respectful, like someone stepping back to give her space. She swallowed hard. "I didn't call you," she whispered. Her shadow projected a wobbling silhouette that shook its head. The dark figure in the corner responded, not by moving, but by shifting its weight so that its outline blocked a memory image forming behind it. A memory the shadows were trying to show her. A memory the presence didn't want her to see. Her breath stalled in her lungs. There were two conversations happening now. One with her shadows, and one with whatever had begun understanding her. The next evening, she gathered her courage and turned off every light in her room. "Can you understand me?" she whispered. Her shadow rose on the floor, mouth opening as if to reply. The corner figure flickered, its shape elongating like a stretched silhouette on a late afternoon sidewalk. It touched the floor with one long, shadowy hand. The girl's own shadow trembled as though receiving instructions. Then it moved. Her shadow stepped closer to her, placed a hand over its own throat, then spread its fingers outward. A symbolic gesture she understood instantly. "You are speaking. You are being heard." Her mouth went dry. "By what?" she whispered. The corner darkened, too dense, too intentional, and her shadow projected a memory she hadn't asked for. A 6-year-old version of herself, standing in a hallway at night, staring at a crack of darkness under her bedroom door. Something moved behind that door. Something that made no sound but cast a shadow anyway. Her breathy whisper hitched into a shaking exhale. "It was you?" she tried to say. Her shadow formed the silhouette of a child reaching toward a taller presence, then ripped itself apart before finishing the image. The corner figure shifted again. Not denial, not confirmation, but something like patient waiting. She couldn't bear the silence. She crawled backward across her bed until she could press herself into the opposite corner, knees drawn up, eyes trained on the darkness watching her. "Why me?" she whispered. Shadows surged across the wall, scenes overlapping. A little girl hiding under blankets, whispering stories into the dark. A hallway lit only by moonlight, where a thin shadow listened at the threshold. Nights spent crying silently, but a presence always near. The childhood longing to be heard by someone, anyone. The images blurred into one conclusion. It chose you because you were speaking long before you knew how. The girl's chest tightened painfully. This thing, this listener, had been with her since childhood. Not haunting, not hurting, hearing. Her voice had always wanted to go somewhere. Now it had found its path out through shadow, to the one who had been listening all along. But something else sank in with cold clarity. Now that it could fully understand her, it would not stop listening. She took a long, trembling breath. "What do you want?" she whispered. Her shadow rose like a dark tide, swirling, forming shapes too complex for her to fully interpret. The corner figure responded, for the first time, by moving, not walking, shifting. Its outline peeled slightly away from the wall, stretching taller, then narrower, then folding in on itself, until it formed a shape that made her throat go tight. A face, almost human, but composed entirely of shadow. The face leaned forward, and the shadows on the walls projected the answer. A scene of her sitting in sunlight, speaking freely, real voice flowing easily, while the shadow presence watched from a corner, content and small. Then another scene, her speaking as she was now, her shadows forming images, and the presence growing larger, clearer, more defined. Then a final scene, her walking into total darkness, the presence stepping beside her, equal in height. The meaning was clear. It wanted to be her voice's destination. It wanted connection. It wanted her. The girl spent the night without sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow face leaning toward her. Not malicious, not hungry, just impossibly present. By dawn, she stood in front of the hallway closet, the one she avoided, the one she hadn't opened since she was 6. Her hands shook as she pulled the door open. Dust, old coats, a box of childhood drawings, and beneath it all, a small, cloth-bound diary. Her handwriting, from long before she could spell properly, twisted across the cover. "For my shadow friend." Her breath caught. She opened the diary. Childish scrawls filled the first pages. "I talk to the dark. Because the dark answers back. Shadows know secrets nobody else knows. When I'm sad, the corner listens. When I whisper, it whispers too. Her throat closed. She flipped ahead. More drawings, swirling shapes, rough outlines of a tall presence, small stick figure versions of herself reaching toward it, notes and shaky lettering. It helps me talk when I'm too scared. It knows my stories. It's waiting for me to grow up. Her whole body went cold. The presence wasn't new. It wasn't sudden. It had always been waiting for her shadow language to return. Always listening. Always patient. She took the diary back to her room, sat cross-legged on the floor, and faced the corner where the presence had appeared the night before. "Were you with me then?" she whispered. The shadows projected the answer instantly. A small girl curled under blankets. A shadow beside the bed, tall, silent, still. A child whispering nonsense syllables into the dark. The shadow shifting faintly, as if understanding. The child smiling and whispering, "Thank you for listening." Tears stung her eyes. "Why did I stop hearing you?" she whispered. The shadows formed the shape of her older self. 8, 9, 10. Turning on lights, closing curtains, pushing shadows away. Growing up, forgetting. Then the presence extended a long, thin arm, not toward her, but toward the diary. Her voice hadn't disappeared. It had simply changed paths. She realized something she hadn't allowed herself to consider. When she whispered as a child, she didn't whisper words. She whispered feelings, intent, emotion. The presence responded not to language, but to longing. She took a deep breath. "What am I speaking now?" she whispered. The shadows answered with breathtaking clarity. A scene of her standing in a dark room, light flickering around her, shadows forming images of her fears, her memories, her hopes. Not words, but meanings. Then the presence moved for the first time in full. It stepped, or folded, out of the corner and stood in the center of the room. A tall, lean shape with indistinct edges, shifting like smoke, trying to remember how to be a person. Her heart pounded. "Are you alive?" she asked. The shadows responded, her own face, reflected, listening. A symbol for mirroring, recognition, understanding. It was alive because she spoke to it. It existed because she needed to be heard. The presence reached out a long arm, not touching her, but offering something. A shadow shape appeared between them, her own silhouette with an open mouth. The meaning hit her like a wave. "I can give your voice back." Her breath trembled. "But what do you want in return?" Shadows surged, forming images. Her sitting in darkness, her speaking in shapes, her leaning toward the presence, her walking deeper into shadow. The presence wanted only one thing. "Don't stop speaking to me." It didn't want her voice. It wanted her attention, her presence, her shadow language. Her silence had fed it. Her shadows sustained it. It wanted companionship, recognition, continuity, not hunger, not dominance. A bond. Something achingly close to devotion. But from which side? She closed the blinds, turned off every light, sat in total darkness with her diary in her hands. "Show me what I truly am to you," she whispered. The room erupted in shadow, not violently, but expansively, as if the walls themselves were exhaling stories she hadn't let herself hear. Shapes filled the space. Her small childhood self, whispering secrets into the corners, because no one else listened. Nights where she cried quietly, but a companion remained near. Moments she thought she was completely alone, but wasn't. Her shadows stepped forward, layering meaning. She had always spoken this language. Her voice had simply been tuned back to it. The presence stepped closer, not looming, not demanding, matching her height, mirroring her shape, listening, always listening. Her shadow, and its shadow, touched fingertips. A gesture of pact, a joining. The presence reached toward her throat, stopping inches away. The shadows showed. Her speaking aloud again, voice returned. Her walking through daylight without fear. Her shadow language still active whenever she chose to use it. The presence standing behind her like a guardian, not an owner. The offer wasn't a trap, it was a choice. Then another set of images layered over it. Her stepping fully into shadow. Her voice remaining only as shapes. Her connection to the presence deepening, intertwining. A life lived half in darkness, half in meaning. The presence wasn't asking for her voice, it was asking for her agreement. She reached out with a trembling hand. Her shadow extended its own. The presence did not move closer. It waited. Still. Quiet. Patient. As it had been her entire life. She whispered, "I'm scared." The shadows answered, two silhouettes. Hers, and a presence, standing side by side in darkness. Not devouring. Not consuming. Just together. She drew a breath, lifted her chin faintly, and whispered a single phrase. "I want to keep speaking, but I don't want to disappear." The shadows rippled with a gentle, understanding tremor. The presence bowed its head. A pact of distance, of coexistence. Her shadows would speak. It would listen, and it would never step closer unless she asked. It faded back into the corner, not gone, but settled, waiting, listening, respecting. For the first time, the girl felt peace instead of fear. Her language had changed forever, but she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Weeks passed. She learned to use both voices. Her spoken one, which slowly returned, and her shadow language, which felt like a deeper truth. She used the first with people, the second with herself. And sometimes, when the room was dark, the corner shifted politely in acknowledgement. She didn't fear it now. The presence wasn't a monster. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't even a memory. It was her listener, her shadow companion, her oldest friend. And as she whispered her nighttime thoughts, letting the shadows paint them softly across the wall, she knew one thing with certainty. Some voices aren't meant to be heard by the world. Some are meant only for the dark that listens back. Thank you for stepping into the quiet dark with me. If this story stayed with you, even for a moment, let me know. Your thoughts help keep this place alive. Until our next one, speak softly out there. The shadows listen more kindly than we think.